With SRN News, I'm Bob Agnew. In Washington, President Trump is refusing to apologize for his sometimes inflammatory rhetoric when it comes to immigration.
At a White House news conference, the president was skeptical about a claim by lawyers that if he apologized for past immigration statements, his travel ban legal case would go away.
I think if I apologize, it wouldn't make 10 cents worth of difference to them. There's nothing to apologize for. We have to have strong immigration laws to protect our country.
He described current immigration laws as weak, obsolete, and pathetic. And the president said he was monitoring the progress of a caravan of migrants making its way north through Latin America toward the United States. Greg Clugston, the White House.
The president is expected to meet soon with North Korea's leader to discuss tensions over the country's nuclear and missile programs. Military affairs analyst, retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, notes that the situation in North Korea is very different than it was during the last talks with North Korea back in the 1990s.
It's not just nuclear reactors, but it's biological weapons, it's chemical weapons. It's also that they have 3 Americans captive, and they continue to harass the Japanese and the Koreans.
Also today, the president said he supports Israel's claim that Iran has been lying about its ongoing efforts to build a nuclear weapon in violation of the controversial nuclear deal with Tehran. The U.S. military says an American soldier was killed, another wounded during a combat operation in eastern Afghanistan. The head of the CDC gets a pay cut.
Dr. Robert Redfield Jr. was pulling in a record salary at the CDC of $375,000. That's nearly twice as much as the woman who held the job before him. It also was well above the compensation of other top federal health officials, including Dr. Redfield's boss, the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services.
And Linda Kenyon says for that reason, the head of the CDC requested the pay cut. This is SRN News. Christian counselors tackling the opioid crisis. Here's SRN's Michael Harrington.
This Friday, the American Association of Christian Counselors is set to hold a day-long event at York, Pennsylvania's Grace Fellowship Church. AACC President Tim Clinton tells the Christian Post the event is designed to, quote, showcase a model of community, civic, and church collaboration that should be reproduced nationwide to help those ensnared by opiates and other substance use disorders. Michael Harrington, SRN News.
Preparations underway for events marking this week's National Day of Prayer.
We have them really from as the sun rises in Maine all the way to the sun goes down in Hawaii.
This National Day of Prayer President Roddy Floyd.
From small gatherings to businesses, to churches, to arenas, to outdoor venues.
A national observance is set for Thursday night on Capitol Hill. This is SRN News. At least several thousand people rallying in Moscow today to protest against recent restrictions on Internet freedom in Russia. Here's correspondent Jeremy House.
Protesters flocked to a central street to rally against the authorities' move to block parts of the Internet in Russia. Russian authorities this month started blocking popular messaging app Telegram over its refusal to hand over encryption keys. Telegram has refused to share data, citing privacy concerns. It's promised to keep the app running despite the ban. In a battle to cripple Telegram's operations, the Russian communications watchdog earlier this month blocked some servers owned by tech giants Google and Amazon, affecting millions of Russian websites. Jeremy House reporting.
Slightly more Americans signed contracts to buy homes in March. Higher mortgage rates and a shortage of available homes are weighing on overall sales figures, according to the National Association of Realtors. More details at srnnews.com. From Washington, I'm Bob Agnew.
From Keene in the Shire, the Liberty Media capital of the world, this is Daryl W. Perry, host of FPP Radio News for Monday, April 30th, 2018. Silver is trading at $16.28 per ounce. Gold is valued at $1,313 per ounce. Zencash is trading at $40, and the average price of Bitcoin is $9,296. Antiwar.com reports during Friday's summit, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un told South Korea's President Moon Jae-in that he is willing to totally abandon nuclear weapons in return for an end to the Korean War and a promise from the United States not to invade. North Korean officials have long said that their nuclear program was only necessary to deter a U.S. attack. Getting a formal pledge from the U.S. not to invade would achieve that goal, assuming it's a credible promise. North Korea appears to believe that they can get such a promise. New Secretary of State Mike Pompeo appeared optimistic as well. In comments on ABC's This Week, Pompeo said he believes there is a real opportunity for a denuclearization deal with North Korea. He added that conditions are right for such a deal. National Security Advisor John Bolton was less hopeful, saying that the U.S. must hold out for concrete evidence of denuclearization. Bolton had long supported attacking North Korea and has never favored diplomacy to achieve U.S. policy goals. Regardless of what cabinet members think, President Trump is the one that's going to be driving U.S. involvement in the peace process. Trump has been very clear in his support for a diplomatic process and the upcoming summit with Kim. Trump has defended the lead up to the summit in the face of growing media hostility towards diplomacy with North Korea. He has also rejected criticism that he's giving away too much, noting he hasn't actually given North Korea anything yet, and it does not intend to without North Korea scrapping its nuclear arsenal. Denuclearization for peace, after all, is exactly the grand bargain that the U.S. had sought with North Korea. The South Korean government has gone to great lengths to lay the groundwork for such a deal and very much wants a deal ending the Korean War. U.S. officials have expressed support for a peace deal, but have emphasized denuclearization as their top priority. Such a deal would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. After growing diplomatic progress, huge deals not only seem possible, but very practical. Everyone is unusually willing to make a deal, and summits are lining up at just the right time to make big things happen.
Are you an advocate for free market money? Do you promote Bitcoin as an alternative in a fiat-centric world? Then you need Spendabit in your arsenal, the search engine for things you can buy with Bitcoin. Spendabit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Visit spendabit.co today. Bitcoin merchants, ask about our merchant suite to reach even more customers. Spendabit.co.
UPI reports Sprint and T-Mobile, two of the top 4 wireless phone carriers in the United States, announced on Sunday they have agreed to an all-stock merger that values the new provider at $146 billion. Deutsche Telekom AG, the German-based company that controls T-Mobile, and SoftBank Group Corp, the Tokyo-headquartered majority owner of Sprint, agreed to combine forces, according to a press release. T-Mobile paid $26.5 billion in stock for Sprint, with the total value including debt. The U.S. company will be called T-Mobile. It will be headquartered in Bellevue, Washington, which is where T-Mobile is based, with a second headquarter at Sprint's office in Overland Park, Kansas. John Legere, current president and CEO of T-Mobile, will serve as the new CEO, and Mike Sievert, current chief operating officer for T-Mobile, will be the president and chief operating officer of the combined company. Current Sprint CEO Marcelo Clare will serve on the board of the new company.
For over 40 years, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals. Gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. They don't feed the banks. They're Bitcoin preferred and have removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760 or visit online at rrbi.co.
Reuters reports police in New Orleans have obtained an arrest warrant for a 4th suspect wanted in connection with a gang rape investigation following the arrest of 3 U.S. Marines charged in the case. 2 women, a Tulane student and her friend, reported that they were raped by 4 men earlier this month at an off-campus home in New Orleans after a night out. The 2 women left a bar with 1 man and went to the house on April 15th. Once there, the man, identified by police as Antonio Landrum, invited 3 other men to the residence. The women claim all 4 men sexually assaulted them. This has been FPP Radio News. Online at fppradio.com.
USA Radio News.
Earlier today, President Trump held a news conference with President Buhari of Nigeria. One of the things President Trump was asked about was the folks trying to get into the United States from Central America.
We are a nation of laws. We have to have borders. We don't have borders, we don't have a country. And I've been watching for weeks as the caravan came up. And you know, the Mexican laws are very tough on immigration, extremely tough. And it started out with way over 1,000 people. I guess now it's down to about 100 going all through Mexico. People don't realize what a big country Mexico is. But it came down by a lot. And now we're working on the border with the worst laws any country, no matter where you go, all over the world. They can't even believe it.
And with a quick look at your numbers on Wall Street, currently the Dow Jones Industrial Average today is trading down a few points with an hour left of trading. This is USA Radio News. President Donald Trump will speak at the annual NRA Association conference this Friday. USA Radio Network's Chris Barnes has more.
It will be Donald Trump's third straight appearance at the annual gathering being held this year in Dallas. Last year, in his first year as president, he told the gathering,
"The 8-year assault on your Second Amendment freedoms has come to a crashing end."
Vice President Mike Pence is also expected to address the gun rights organization on Friday. For USA Radio News, I'm Chris Barnes.
More than 500 homes are under a threat from the rapidly expanding Tinder fire in Arizona, which exploded from 500 acres to 8,000 acres in the span of a few hours yesterday. Roads were closed and a shelter was set up near Flagstaff, Arizona, where the Red Cross is there lending a hand.
We have food, water, medical supplies. We have the crates and kennels that we can set up.
That was Amy Johnson, spokesman for the Red Cross. This is USA Radio News. The illegal immigrant caravan swamped border officials yesterday in San Diego as hundreds of people showed up at the San Ysidro port of entry and demanded into the United States as reporters and other people watched from Mexico. All the people quickly overwhelmed port officers and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, who said they'd reached their capacity for the day and the rest would have to wait and try later. This had many people crying foul, including an immigrants' rights attorney.
The message for Customs and Border Protection: stop rejecting asylum seekers who try to present themselves at the port of entry. You know what you're doing. You know you turn people away. You complain that they are breaking the law by entering illegally. You are breaking the law, and you are forcing them to break the law. That's why we have caravans.
Meanwhile, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says it can be difficult to process a large group of people when they show up at the border.
It does make it difficult as these large numbers of people, when they come in at the same time, it makes it challenging for us to process them appropriately. Ultimately, I think they will get their hearing. I mean, they have a right to an asylum hearing. However, it'll be a legitimate hearing, and these people have to show, as I said, they'll have to show that they satisfy the conditions for asylum.
Now, the immigrants are expected to claim they have a credible fear of returning to their home countries, and those are the so-called magic words that would give them an early claim to asylum. Once they've made that claim, they're supposed to have their cases heard by immigration judges. For USA Radio News, I'm Tim Berg.
The rugby, the footy, the horses, the golf, the GA. Students, whatever you're a fan of, fuel your passion for sport with a little help from Vodafone X. Switch today and never miss a moment with Sky Sports Mobile TV and 20 gigs of 4G data for just €20 top-up, plus 100 minutes of calls and unlimited texts. Now that's more fuel for more fun. Search Vodafone X now. For full terms, conditions and limitations, including our fair usage policy, see Vodafone.ie.
Summit venues. I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. President Trump says the North Korea-South Korea demilitarized zone may be a good location for a summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un.
Some people maybe don't like the look of that, and some people like it very much. I threw it out today as an idea.
The president says North Korean leader has been open and forthright so far. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has new information about Iran and its nuclear weapons program.
Iran lied. Big time.
The prime minister gave a primetime speech and says there was once a secret weapons program in Iran, Project Ahmad.
We can now prove that Project Ahmad was a comprehensive program to design, build, and test nuclear weapons.
Iran's state-run news agency says Netanyahu is famous for ridiculous shows. President Trump says the report from Israel shows that he was right about Iran. I'm Ed Donahue.
From CBC News, The World This Hour, I'm Zintar Sirs, and we begin in the Middle East.
Iran is brazenly lying when it says it never had a nuclear weapons program.
Israel's prime minister says that he has proof that Iran is maintaining a secret nuclear weapons program and hiding it from the international community. In a show-and-tell presentation, Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel has obtained Iran's nuclear files and produced their copies for the press.
Here's the warhead. Here's the bomb. And I don't have to remind you, I think, that Iran is continually expanding the range of its ballistic missiles, its nuclear-capable missiles. They started with 1,000 kilometers. They're now up to 2,000, roughly. They can reach Riyadh, Tel Aviv, Moscow.
Netanyahu accused Iran of moving its nuclear weapons program to a secret location after it signed a deal with the international community in 2015. His presentation comes as U.S. President Donald Trump is deciding whether to pull the U.S. out of the nuclear accord with Iran. Here at home, an Ontario court has upheld the conviction of a former Toronto police officer. James Forcillo was convicted of attempted murder after he shot and killed 18-year-old Sami Yatim on a Toronto streetcar 5 years ago. The jury found that Forcillo fired an excessive number of shots. Forcillo's lawyers appealed, arguing that the volley of gunfire should not have been separated into two separate charges. Ontario's Human Rights Tribunal has ordered a Toronto restaurant to pay $10,000 to a black man after ruling it had discriminated against him by insisting that he and his friends pay up front before being served. Nicole Ireland has the story.
When we got outside, that's when the anger turned into sadness and a dejection.
Emil Wickham remembers the night he and 3 friends went to Hong Xing Chinese restaurant to celebrate his birthday. The server told them they had to pay for their meal up front. When they asked why, the server said it was normal policy. But when Wickham asked other customers in the restaurant if they'd had to do the same, they all said no. Wickham and his friends were the only black people there. When they asked why they were being singled out, a manager dismissed the question and gave their money back. In response to the investigation launched by the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, the restaurant said it asked for the money up front because late-night customers sometimes dine and dash. The tribunal ruled it had engaged in racial profiling. Wickham says he's happy his human rights complaint was listened to and believed, but still disappointed because the restaurant has never apologized. Nicole Ireland, CBC News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau joined Amazon executives for an announcement in Vancouver today. A former Canada Post office in downtown Vancouver will soon become part of the Amazon empire. The company says it will turn the building into a tech hub, employing about 3,000 people. The federal government tabled a bill today that would change how Canadians vote. People would again be allowed to use voter information cards as ID and vouch for another voter, but the Elections Modernization Act would also affect how political parties can try to win votes. Karina Roman reports.
New spending limits for political parties and advocacy organizations for both the pre-election and election periods. A new limit to the election period, no longer than 50 days. Measures to increase accessibility for the disabled and to increase flexibility in voting for the Canadian Forces. Voting hours would be extended, and political parties would face new requirements to protect Canadians' privacy. But NDP Democratic Reform critic Nathan Cullen doesn't believe the government can get the bill passed in time for the 2019 federal election.
They've known about this deadline for more than a year. And on the last day of handing in their homework, they're rushing in with a bunch of things and saying, don't worry, everything's going to be okay.
The bill also promises more powers and independence for the Elections Commissioner and measures aimed at restricting foreign influence in Canadian elections. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is your world this hour. For CBC News, I'm Zintar Sirs.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
Renewing the rivalry. I'm Jeff Biggs, and another big night for the NBA. The Eastern Conference semis will begin in Boston with Terry Rozier and the Celtics, who had to go 7 games with the Bucks, still home, and taking on the surging Sixers, who beat the Heat in 5.
Oh, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle. Them guys is just red hot right now. They playing very well. They got a lot of great guys around. Ben Simmons, who's pushing the pace, and they playing at a high level. We just got to do what we can to pay attention to details and stop them and play Celtics basketball. So we'll be ready on Monday. So it's going to be a great test for us.
The Celtics and the Sixers have met 19 times in the postseason. That is the most in NBA history. But with that said, they've actually only met 3 times in the last 33 years, and this is going to be the first playoff matchup since 2012. Today at Shoot-Around, Brad Stevens did not have an update on Jaylen Brown, who is questionable with the strained right hamstring. On the ice tonight on NBC, Game 2 from Tampa, the Lightning looking to strike back against the Bruins. And then after that, on NBCSN, Game 3 from San Jose between the Sharks and the Golden Knights, who are tied 1-1. Baseball tonight, no playoffs, but we do get a rematch of last season's ALCS in Houston with Aaron Boone now at the helm of the Yankees, who have won 9 in a row. Even Terry Rozier's fired up.
Obviously, the offense is a big story for us, but we're not doing this without the starting pitching we've been getting. They've been really good. They've been, for the most part, pretty consistent, and then turning it over to our pen, which is starting to find a good groove. And it's been a good brand of baseball all the way around. But the starting pitching are the guys that set the tone.
And that includes Yanks starter Sonny Gray, who has an ERA of 7.71. I'm Jeff Biggs. This is NBC Sports Radio.
Iran lied.
An Israeli claim that could torpedo the Iran nuclear deal.
Trade tensions rising between the United States and Europe as another deadline approaches.
Sprint shares take a beating as investors fear a deal with T-Mobile looks iffy.
This is Reuters Now.
Iran lied. Big time.
Speaking first in English and backed up by large annotated slides, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Iran of violating a landmark nuclear deal.
Iran lied about never having a nuclear weapons program.
Netanyahu on Monday said Israel had obtained secret Iranian archives showing Tehran had at one point sought to develop weapons-grade nuclear material and warheads, something Iran has always denied.
So Iran devised a plan to do 2 things. First, to preserve the nuclear know-how from Project Ahmad, and second, to further develop its nuclear weapons-related capabilities. That plan came directly from Iran's top leadership.
The Prime Minister said Iran's failure to disclose the program violated the country's commitment to come clean about its nuclear past. That commitment was key to a 2015 accord between Tehran and 6 major world powers. That deal lifted international sanctions on Iran in exchange for limits and monitors on Iran's nuclear facilities. Israel has long opposed the agreement. Netanyahu's presentation comes as U.S. President Donald Trump weighs whether or not to withdraw from that deal. And Trump on Monday seemed receptive to the message.
What Israel has done today with the news conference, and Prime Minister Netanyahu just gave I don't know if everybody's seen it, but I got to see a little bit of it, and that is just not an acceptable situation.
Trump has set a self-imposed deadline of May 12th to decide on the fate of the deal, which he's repeatedly criticized. International monitors have repeatedly said that Iran is in compliance with the terms of the 2015 agreement.
With world markets bracing, President Trump faces a midnight deadline on his aluminum and steel tariffs that could dramatically ramp up the threat of a global trade war. Trump must decide whether to impose those tariffs on some of America's closest allies. Germany's Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron of France both traveled to the White House last week to implore President Trump to hold off. Back in March, Trump gave European nations, as well as Australia, Argentina, and Brazil, a temporary delay. Now all are on the hot seat, facing possible import duties of 25% on steel products and 10% on aluminum.
A commercial war opposing allies is not consistent with our mission.
European Union officials say they're ready to hit back if Trump brings the hammer down. This as fears are growing of a showdown over trade between the United States and China. Trump has already imposed tariffs on China, and Beijing responding in kind, slapping duties on pork, wine, and fruit, raising anxiety in U.S. farm country. First of all, Trump's top economic and trade officials, including Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, will be in Beijing this week, trying to avert a trade war, but also pushing for further concessions from China.
China is going to end up treating us fairly.
Chinese trade officials are stiffening their stance. The New York Times reporting that they're refusing to talk about Trump's demand for a $100 billion cut in its trade surplus with the United States.
I'm a baker and I am a migraine sufferer. Working with a migraine is overwhelming. I take Excedrin before it all goes off the cliff, then I'm back to my life again.
Excedrin Migraine, relief that works as hard as you do.
John Jackson, a 25-year-old from Concord, New Hampshire, says he's not a Democrat or a Republican, but he does like the GOP's record on jobs and the economy.
When you look at the Republican Party, they're all about American jobs, not putting stuff overseas.
Jackson is not alone. While millennials still largely back Democrats in the upcoming midterm elections, a new Reuters Ipsos poll finds that Republicans are chipping away at their support this year, especially among young whites who make up 2 of every 3 millennial voters. This shift could potentially impact which party controls Congress after the November election, especially here in Manchester, New Hampshire, likely one of the most competitive congressional races that we'll see this year. Young white voters make up more than a quarter of the district's voting age population, which means millennials could make a big difference in the outcome.
I could go either way. Okay.
This year, voters will pick from a wide slate of candidates, including 8 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And the candidates are working overtime to connect with young people, campaigning on college campuses and social media, and hitting on the issues that they think will resonate. One major topic, student debt. Maura Sullivan is a Democratic candidate.
We need to look at how we bring down the cost of college. We need to look at different ways that people can access a higher education.
But one of her Republican opponents, Eddie Edwards, has a different message.
They made a decision to take on this debt. So at this point, we have to figure out a way to get them to a place that they can become entrepreneurs again, start families, buy homes, their starter homes.
The Reuters Ipsos poll found that back in 2016, millennials predominantly supported Democratic candidates over Republicans. Fast forward to the upcoming midterms, and that support for Democrats has slipped about 10 points. Leading the shift, white millennials, especially young white men whose support has crossed party lines. In the first part of 2016, young white men backed Democrats over Republicans. But in 2018, ahead of the midterms, it's the reverse. And some of the credit appears to go to President Trump.
It's the economy, stupid. Did you ever hear that one? It's the economy.
Who relentlessly positioned himself as a champion of the American worker. It's still very early in this election cycle, and much will depend on which party does a better job at getting millennials to actually show up on Election Day. But the poll shows that public opinion is clearly trending in the wrong direction for Democrats, with the group that historically gave them an advantage.
The 2 Koreas are taking their first small steps towards reconciliation this week after a landmark summit between the leaders of both sides ended with an agreement to pursue peace and get rid of nuclear weapons. Pyongyang says it will set the North's clocks 30 minutes earlier to match the South's time zone this Saturday. And on Monday, officials in the South said they're removing their loudspeakers that blast propaganda at the DMZ. Polls also showed that after the feel-good vibes from the summit, 2/3 of South Koreans trust Kim's promises. One made after the meetup was a vow from Kim that he would invite experts and media in to watch Pyongyang shut down its nuclear test site. However, Reuters' Josh Smith explains some are skeptical as to what the world will really be able to see.
North Korea has also brought in experts and media when they destroyed part of a nuclear reactor in 2008. This, of course, did not stop them from going on and continuing to develop their nuclear weapons program. So this is something that many experts have expressed a lot of skepticism about. Many of them are expecting North Korea to simply perhaps dynamite the caves that they have tested several of their nuclear weapons in, leaving them potentially in the position to open them back up later if they wanted to.
And one of the lingering questions still left after the meeting, what exactly denuclearization means or how it can be achieved.
The Inter-Korean Summit, the declaration that the 2 sides came out with was rather vague. It laid out some broad ideals, broad goals, but not a lot of details on exactly how North Korea would give up its nuclear weapons, what they might want in return, and how it might be verified. Even observers who were skeptical of this noted that a lot of these details will, however, need to be worked out with other players like the United States and China.
The next big step is Kim's upcoming meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, set for late May or early June. On Monday, an official said that South Korean President Moon Jae-in told senior secretaries Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to end the standoff with North Korea. Moon apparently said that, quote, Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. What we need is only peace.
just another day on the farm. Or is it? This farmer's morning starts in outer space, where satellites feed infrared images of his land into a system built with AI. He uses Watson to analyze his data with millions of weather forecasts from the cloud and IoT sensors down here for precise monitoring of irrigation. It's a smart way to help increase yields, all before the rest of us get out of bed.
A deadly blast in the Afghan capital Kabul on Monday. And then, when journalists arrived, a second explosion. At least 26 people are reported to have died in the rush hour attacks that have since been claimed by Islamic State. Among the dead, 9 journalists. That makes this the worst death toll for media workers in a single attack in the country. French news agency AFP confirms on Twitter that its chief photographer in Kabul, Shah Morai, was among those killed. The reporters had arrived to cover an initial blast near the National Directorate of Security in the Shashtarak area of the city.
The enemy, posing as a cameraman, detonated his explosives among a group of journalists in the area. As a result of the explosion, a number of our journalists and other people who were passers-by and nearby residents who were gathered at the scene were martyred and wounded.
7 hours later, in the southern province of Kandahar, a suicide bomber drove an explosives-laden truck into a foreign military force convoy, killing 11 children and injuring 16 others. No militant group has yet claimed responsibility. The attacks come just a week after a blast at a voter registration centre in Kabul killed 60 people, and in the wake of warnings by security officials that there is an increasing risk of attacks ahead of parliamentary elections in October. Last week, the Taliban, which is fighting to restore their strict interpretation of Islamic law to Afghanistan, announced their usual spring offensive, and there has been heavy fighting in several parts of the country ever since.
British Prime Minister Theresa May appointed a new Interior Minister on Monday, trying to shut down an immigration scandal that threatens her own authority. Sajid Javid takes the place of Amber Rudd, a key ally of May's and a prominent pro-European in her divided cabinet. May's Conservative government has been forced to apologise after some long-term UK residents from the Caribbean were declared illegal immigrants and denied basic rights. Rudd said she inadvertently misled Parliament last week by denying the government had deportation targets. But a newly leaked letter she sent May last year spoke of an ambitious but deliverable aim to deport more illegal immigrants. Rudd is the fourth minister May has lost to scandals in 6 months.
Shares of Sprint plunging over 13% Monday after agreeing to a mega merger with T-Mobile in an all-stock deal worth $26 billion. John Legere, the outspoken CEO of T-Mobile, would become the new head of the proposed combined company if he gets his way. But he's got to clear some steep regulatory hurdles to combine the number 3 and 4 wireless carriers. Antitrust concerns killed merger talks between the two companies before. Reuters Breaking Views columnist Jennifer Saba.
So this time we're looking at a Republican administration, so they tend to be a little friendlier towards deals. However, this is still a horizontal merger. It's a big deal, and they may block it. I mean, it is a huge hurdle for T-Mobile and Sprint to get through, even under a Republican administration. And even if President Donald Trump really wants to build out a 5G network.
Legere says his tie-up is America's best chance to stay ahead of China in the race to build 5G, which he says will give Americans a cheaper, faster network and will create new jobs.
5G is the next generation of wireless services. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to let your refrigerator talk to Alexa, or autonomous cars on the road, they're going to be talking to the road to make sure everything is safe. So this is very important that we have this in place. So far, the United States is behind China and other countries.
But investors still don't like the merger's chances, sending both Sprint and T-Mobile shares sharply lower on the day.
It's harvest season in the poppy fields of Afghanistan, ground zero for most of the world's heroin supply. The government has been trying to stamp out this illegal crop for years, but farmers are hooked. Mohammed Nadir makes about $3,000 a year. He says if he were to switch to another crop, his income would fall to a third of that. These farmers are willing to take the risk because they have help. Taliban insurgents protect poppy fields and help find smugglers to sell the produce. In return, they take a share of the profits.
The government asked us not to cultivate poppies, but we ignore them. The Taliban never say anything. In fact, they're happy with us because they get part of what we earn.
Experts say Afghanistan's opium trade brings in about $1.4 billion a year, and it's a major source of funds for the Taliban. The U.S. is working with local forces to choke off this revenue, launching airstrikes against drug labs in parts of the country. But opium production is still on the rise. Experts say farmers in the war-torn country see it as the best bet in the face of increasing violence and economic uncertainty. The government has tried promoting other crops, but farmers say they haven't done enough.
We've asked the government to provide us with other jobs or alternative crops like tomatoes and other vegetables in order to earn enough money. If there were an alternative, then we wouldn't need to cultivate poppies anymore.
Officials say they don't have the resources to stamp out opium production for good. Some are calling for a special task force and gear like surveillance helicopters. Resources hard to come by in a country struggling to curb a growing insurgency.
You're up to date. Check back later as stories develop.